Hurts has got it, wants to throw. Hurts setting up the screen. It is complete and blown up. Miles Sanders caught it. Malcolm Rodriguez was there waiting for him. That's a big play by Rodrigo.
Welcome to another edition of the 20-Minute in the Huddle podcast presented by Microsoft. It is week 8 in the NFL, and I start every weekly podcast with news and notes. And obviously the big one this week is principal owner and chair Sheila Hamp, stopped by and talked to the media a little bit on Wednesday. And look, it's always big news when ownership, stops and talks. And she obviously expressed her frustration with the record being what it is at 1-5, but she also talked about this being a teardown and a rebuild, and it was. I mean, look, you changed the front office with Brad Holmes taking over there. You changed the entire coaching staff with Dan Campbell, and then your franchise player, the guy that you've built the team around for the last 11 years, asked for and was granted a trade. And so now you're starting over there too. And so, to her point, it was a considerable rebuild. It was a teardown to start this all over. And look, it was great to hear from Sheila. We haven't heard from the previous owners all that much. And for her to come out, take the time and chat with reporters, following the open portion of practice, I thought it was great. And it was insightful. Look, she talked about some things that she thinks are promising. Some of the things offensively they did the first month. They obviously have to get back to that. Playing a lot of the young players, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But look, there's going to be some ups and downs when you are as young a roster as the Lions are, when you're starting 4 rookies like the Lions did, last week in Dallas. But I think, the gains are going to be on the back end of that and getting these guys some experience. And so, look, she preached patience a little bit. There's frustration there, obviously, but she really believes in the plan in place. She believes in the senior leadership. And, so we're just going to have to kind of see where these 11 games take us. Pivoting from that, obviously injuries are huge every week. And, it was a long list on Wednesday. There were 9 guys that didn't practice on Wednesday, but the good news is Thursday, a few of those guys, Jonah Jackson returned, Josh Reynolds returned, TJ Hawkinson returned. So, they're getting some of those guys back. We still got to see about Deshaun Elliott, Charles Harris. Some of those guys we'll see as the week goes on. But that's obviously going to be a big storyline going in. But at least it looks offensively that the Lions are going to get the majority of their guys back, including DeAndre Swift, who's been a full participant in practice all week. Amon-Ra St. Brown obviously was removed from the game because of the concussion protocol. He's been practicing in limited fashion as he gets back from the protocol, but it looks like he's going to play too. And so getting DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown back is going to be huge for this Lions offense. Now, we talked about, them not being, as consistent the last 2 weeks after getting off to a hot start that first month. Well, they haven't had Swift during those during those last 2 weeks where they haven't played as consistently. They haven't had a fully healthy Amon-Ra St. Brown. And so those guys are such huge matchup weapons that, it's definitely be good to get those guys back. I think that's going to benefit Jared Goff in this offense, and I would expect them to maybe get back on track to what we saw the first month versus what we've seen, the last 2 weeks. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the game Jeff Okudah is coming off of in Dallas, and really the season he's had. I asked Jeff on Wednesday if he was a little bit more sore on Monday than he was typical Mondays because, look, the guy had 15 tackles and a tackle for loss. He's the first cornerback in the NFL to have at least 15 tackles since 1994. I mean, he was all over the place. And look, Jeff's a physical guy. He doesn't mind coming up and putting his hat in the run game. He's been really, really good in that regard all season long. He still hasn't allowed a touchdown in his coverage area. So, look, he's another one of those young guys, and I consider him a young guy even his third year because he just hasn't played. He obviously played the 10 game his rookie year. He only played 1 game before the Achilles injury, so he is still a young player, and I just see the confidence building in that young man, and he's obviously going to have a great matchup this week against Tyreek Hill. We'll probably see Jalen Waddle some too. Those are 2 of the fastest guys in the league, 2 of the best in the business, so Jeff certainly got his work cut out for him this week, but it's good to see him playing the way he is and his confidence building the way it is. And I talked about the 4 rookies off the top. Aiden Hutchinson, a couple sacks last week, 3 quarterback hits. We finally got to see Josh Paschal, his NFL debut after missing the first 5 games with that sports hernia injury. Played 56 snaps. Good for him. And he's only going to get better. Had 2 tackles, but he impacted the game more than the box score would indicate. He strung out some plays, for guys to make some tackles, including Jeff Okudah. He was also, in the backfield pressuring Dak Prescott, sped his clock up a couple times. So a good debut, and I expect him to be, only better moving forward. We've seen Malcolm Rodriguez all year. He's been consistent. But then Kirby Joseph in his 3rd start, forced a fumble, should have had an interception. But now we're starting to see some of those playmaking things that we saw as a senior in Illinois. We knew he was a ball hawk, could get his hands on footballs, 5 interceptions his senior year at Illinois. But, he's a little more physical than I think Aaron Glenn and this Lions team, thought they were getting in him, and that's obviously a positive. Other news and notes: Jack Fox, our what is it? What does he try to refer himself at? PJ, the field position optimization specialist. Well, he's a very rich field position optimization specialist now after signing a contract to be the highest paid punter in the NFL through 2026. Obviously a great thing for the organization. He's been one of the most consistent punters in the league since he's stepped on the field. He's a weapon. He can turn the field like that. He can throw a pretty good ball, 75% completion percentage too when you decide to fake it too. So, good for him on getting that contract. Good for the Lions to get that done. And I think we'll stay with kicking to finish off the news and notes here. Michael Bagley, 2 made field goals last week. Dave Fipp said last week he felt pretty good. He thought the kicking would calm down a little bit with Bagley now in tow. We saw that last week, including a 53-yarder that he made. So hopefully that continues on forward. So those are your news and notes, but I got a huge show for you guys this week. I am going to welcome in, actually, Jack Fox. We're going to talk about that new contract and just how he got to where he was. The voice of the Lions, Dan Miller, and the Fox 2 Sports director is going to join me for the MGM, the BetMGM key matchups. Travis Wingfield from the Miami Dolphins is going to join me. He does a good job covering Miami down there. So I have a pack-loaded show for you guys. Stick around. It'll be fun. Welcome back to the 20-Minute Huddle podcast. And now I am joined by Travis Wingfield, who is the host of the Drive Time podcast and part of the Miami Dolphins podcast network and a writer for MiamiDolphins.com. He knows everything Miami Dolphins, does a great job covering the team down there. Travis, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you, Tim. That's a great introduction there. So I hope I live up to the hype there.
Well, everything seems well in Miami now after a big win over Pittsburgh this weekend. The team feeling pretty good about themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there was never really a loss of confidence, even during the losing streak. I mean, after the game against the Vikings, Teron Armstead kind of came out with a tweet saying something like, we know we have in this locker room, we know what we expect from each other. And there's just a belief in one another. It's a very confident bunch, and getting that victory on Sunday night certainly helped get the ship right in the back direction and back in the right direction, I should say. And quarterback's back playing well, and excited about what's going to happen here this Sunday and going forward.
I was reading your 3 takeaways. You do 3 takeaways after every game. And one of the things that you mentioned was winning while working out the kinks. And I think that's important in the NFL, especially early in the season, right? And especially with the quarterback situation that you guys have had there, losing Tua for some time, but still being able to work on some things. Obviously, some continuity offensively with Tua coming back was the case last week, but still finding a way to win. And just how important has that been?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys can attest to it yourselves, right? You guys have been so close so many times, but you just don't get that victory in the end. And under a rookie head coach like Mike McDaniel, you're excited to see it because, the penalties have kind of reared their head a little bit this season. The turnovers and takeaway margin has not been in the Dolphins' benefit for most of the season, but when they do get it right, they do win the games. So to be able to come away from those games where you have mistakes and things you can work on with a victory, that's the best of both worlds, because then you have a chance to make corrections and continue to do what Mike McDaniel always talks about, which is if you're a team that ultimately is going to be one that you want to, be on the journey you want to be on, you're going to get better as the year goes along. And I think for this Dolphins team across the board, they're kind of seeing that. Defense is playing better. Offense is getting things going. Obviously, again, quarterback is back, so that helps big time too. So it's nice to get wins while you're learning, but learning is certainly important in this league, as we know.
Well, let's talk about the quarterback a little bit, because obviously that's a big component for you guys. Just his ability to make plays, get the ball out of his hands, his accuracy. You look at Tua's 105.9 passer rating. That's fourth best in the NFL, and you didn't have him for 2.5 weeks. It looked like there was maybe a little rust there, which you expect, but just how important was getting him back, and what that means for your guys, for your offense moving forward, and for this week against Detroit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Tua does so well is gets the football out of his hands. And you go back, the knock on Tua has been his availability, right? He's missed some games each of his first 3 years here in the league. And when he's out there, what you get is a perfect snapshot of what it's like when he's not out there. And when he's not out there, there's a lot more sacks and pressures in the quarterback. So he really kind of makes his teammates better, expedites the process of, just getting the football out quicker. And then you mentioned, the accuracy and the passer rating, man. He's putting the ball in spots for these playmakers, and we know what Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can do. They are two of the most explosive players in the NFL. He's putting the ball in position for those guys to make plays after the catch, and it's been a really good pairing because his accuracy with their speed and explosiveness, it's the vision of the Dolphins front office to get that kind of, the yak yards that Mike McDaniel talked about. It's a great fit for these guys.
What are coaches saying about him lowering his shoulder a couple times against Pittsburgh, though? I'm sure there's a conversation to be had in Miami about Tua lowering his shoulder.
He mentioned in his Wednesday media availability that everybody else told him, don't do that, but it's football. And he, the instincts take over at a certain point, and it's going to be hard to train that out of a guy that's been doing his whole life. Right. So, I mean, at some point, I think we all hope that he will get down. Tua, we don't need you running guys over on second down. The third down with the sticks, I can understand, but second and goal, let's just live to fight third down.
You mentioned the dynamic weapons that Tua has in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, number 1 in the NFL in receiving yards, number 4. I mean, you look at Waddle, the 18.3 yards per reception. That's 5th most in the league. It's just really explosive. And one of the things Detroit's talked about this week, especially defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn on Thursday, was just rallying to the football. They do a lot of this speed motion, and you'll put those guys out wide and cross them and make guys run to you, but you've really got to converge on them because the run after the catch with both those guys is so dangerous. Just how fun have those two been to watch, and some of the plays that they can make and take a 2-yard catch and go 80 yards. That's the thing I think Detroit's most worried about heading into that matchup Sunday.
Yeah, you cover this team when you watch this team, I should say, for 20 plus years. The playmakers on the outside have just been something we haven't had down here in South Florida since the Duper brother, or the Marks brothers, I should say, Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. We kind of have that recreated down here with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. It's so much fun to watch. It was a blast in training camp, explosive plays left and right. And then to see it translate to Sundays. I mean, that Ravens game alone, just watching both those guys take over and put forth one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history in that fourth quarter to get that victory. The way they complement the running game and how this kind of play action, you mentioned all the jet sweep motions and stuff they do, it's just all complementary of one another. And the speed is the main thing. Like, yeah, they are fast, and it really helps create some of that off coverage that creates that space in the middle. But also these two guys are both so competitive and fierce in terms of their route running and the way they set guys up. Every part of their game is really complete. And that's been the most fun part to watch. It's not just the deep speed, but everything else underneath as well.
And I'm talking to Travis Wingfield, who does a great job covering the Miami Dolphins for the Miami Dolphins. And Travis, let's switch over to the defensive side of the football. I was seeing some of the articles, some of the press conferences in Miami this week, and I know leading into last week's game, turnovers were kind of an issue, were a point of emphasis. Miami was -5 in turnover differential going into that game last week. To get 3 interceptions and lower that turnover differential and kind of step up to the challenge that coaches had, how important was that for that defense last week?
It's absolutely huge. I mean, this defense over the last couple of years here under Josh Boyer has been all about third down defense and the splash plays and the takeaways. And they kind of set that up from the run defense, obviously getting early down stops. But I mean, when they're taking the football away and creating short fields for the offense, it's the best of both worlds. And they didn't have that. Like you mentioned, they had an interception on the first drive of the game back in week 1 against the Patriots, and then went 5 games without one, which is so rare for a defense that has Xavier Howard and Jevon Holland. But I think a big part of that has been, Byron Jones hasn't been available. Nick Needham is out for the season. Kader Kohu, a rookie undrafted free agent who's playing a lot, has missed a couple of games. Keon Crossan missed last game. This is a banged up secondary. I think a big part of what Jevon Holland's role has been as a result of that is playing more of that kind of deep part of the field where he just kind of makes sure they don't get beat deep and they prevent the big play from happening, which obviously, is a big part of the NFL these days. But when he had a chance against Pittsburgh, to come down and kind of hunt the quarterback and key his eyes. He did it one time and got a pick on the play, and it was a game-changing pick there late in the game. So I think that as they get the rest of the guys more comfortable in the system at that cornerback position, you can maybe free up Jevon Holland more, and he is a heck of a playmaker. Keep an eye on number 8 Sunday. He's always around the football.
You know, I know Ben Johnson's talked Thursday, and he really was complimentary of that front, and he said this might be the best run-stuffing front that we faced all year long. Obviously, they faced Dallas last week. That's a little bit different. That's a speed rush, 24 sacks. They get after the quarterback. That's not so much Miami's game. They're more stout up front, read and react, right, and really, really good against the run game. Is Coach right about that? Has that been the strength defensively for you guys, is just that front?
Yeah, absolutely. The way they 2-gap up front is set up by 3 guys, and Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, and Raekwon Davis. They are so gap sound, and they always tend to not get washed out, and even double teams that can hold the point very strong. It's that bear front they often run. You head up over the center and then head up over the 2 guards, and that allows the linebackers to free flow and make the plays the way they do. And yeah, Wilkins is in his 4th year, and he's gotten better every single year. Last year, I think he had like 89 tackles, which was the most by a defensive tackle since like 2012 or something like that. And he's playing even better this year. He's been freaking awesome. And then, I mentioned Zach Sealer. He's one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He is so tough to move, occasional pass rush move here and there as well. If you guys have a 4th and short, number 92 makes stops on 4th and short. Like nobody else I've ever seen in my entire life. He's so incredible. So those guys set the tone. Obviously coverage marries up with rush and the front, but I think you're right. Coach Johnson was right. It really starts up front for this defense that has been banged up in the back end.
Well, it's interesting. That's been a little bit of an issue here. The 4th and 1, the 3rd and 1, those short situations. Such a good running football team, and then they've run into some of those problems. So I'll have to run down and give Johnson a head up on that number, but I'm pretty sure he's already got him zeroed into his game plan. Look, Travis, Mike McDaniel seems like a fun guy to cover. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, the best, the very best. I mean, it's every day. He walks into the press conference room, and he's always got a quip ready for us. And it's just like, what's he got today? Like, he's almost, entertaining us opposed to us trying to, get things out of him. It's different than what you're used to, that's for sure.
But one of the things he talked about, too, was not taking this Detroit Lions team lightly because of their record. And he talked about, look, you are what your film says you are. And sure, this Detroit Lions team has made mistakes. They're young, and that comes with the territory. But they've been explosive at times, too. And Mike certainly recognized that. And has that really been the message in Miami all week is, look, don't look at this team as a 1-5 football team. This is a team that can be dangerous, that have shown themselves to be dangerous, that have been in some close games. What's been the message from Mike to his players about this matchup Sunday?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, the Dolphins kind of got a little bit of a dose of reality against the Jets a couple weeks ago when they were struggling and the Dolphins were coming, riding high. Even though, Tua was out and everything, they wound up kind of taking it on the chin in that game. I think it was a good lesson for them to just understand, like, there's never a moment in this league where you can, take even a play off. So with the Detroit Lions, like you mentioned, I mean, you guys, you see it. I mean, the tape is good as far as getting the ball up and down the field. Obviously, defense has had some struggles, but you guys have been in so many games where, if you don't come to play, the Lions can roll up 40 points on you. So the message is certainly to go ahead and, treat this as important as any other game you have, especially, coming off that 3-game losing streak. There's the margin for error in this league is so slim and so thin. I mean, what's the point spread? Like 3 points this week? I mean, there you go. Yeah. It's almost every game is close, especially today. It seems like parity is at an all-time high. So I don't think you'll see the Dolphins take anybody lightly the rest of the way.
All right, Travis, I want to end with this one. The Dolphins keep pace with the rest of the teams in the AFC. They move to 5-3 if what happens at Ford Field Sunday? I
think if they can come out and limit the Lions running game, because I think if they can keep Jared Goff in that offense in 3rd and long, that's kind of where the rush games and the exotic blitz packages come about. And they can certainly get, heat up Jared Goff in the way they have in the past when he played for the Rams. I know it's a different offense and a different team entirely, but if they can keep them in 3rd and longs and then kind of generate some situations where they get the splash plays on defense, I do think the offense will have their fair share of success running the ball, throwing the ball. So if defensively they can create the takeaways, get the splash plays, I think they'll have a good chance to beat the Lions on Sunday.
Well, Travis, great stuff. Thanks for breaking it down. Safe travels here to Detroit. A little bit cooler than where you're from, but still pretty good weather this week, and I'll make sure I stop by and say hello in the press box.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Tim. Appreciate you.
Welcome back to the Twentyman the Huddle podcast, and I am joined by the what is it? Field position optimization specialist? Is that one of the ones that you go by there? Jack Fox, obviously one of the best punters in the NFL, and now the highest paid punter in the NFL. Congratulations on the contract.
Thank you.
And just, we were talking a little bit before the podcast, just what was this process like for you? I mean, how did this come about? Was it something that was fairly quick? Was it something you've been working on for a while? Or I guess just take us through the process of how you got to this point.
Yeah, I think it has been a little bit of a process. My agent's done a great job. They were talking in the offseason. It didn't get done by the beginning of the season. And my agent was still working on it, but he really wasn't giving me any updates. He just wanted me to focus on the game and all that. And then we kind of reconvened during the bye week, and he'd made a lot of progress, and it got to a point where we signed it. So I was really excited, and yeah.
You've got to appreciate that part about your agent, not kind of letting you just, hey, you deal with the football part of it, right? You be the best punter in the league, which you've shown to be last year, this year, throughout your career. And I'll take care of this. And obviously the Lions want to get something done. I mean, the numbers are what the numbers are. You are the best punter in the league right now. And so you've got to love that about your agent, kind of taking that part of it, that stress part of it off you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate that part of it. And yeah, I think he's been around the block a little bit, and he kind of understands how kickers, punters work.
Who's your agent?
His name's Sean Kiernan.
There you go. We got to shout him out.
Yeah, there you go. Sean, you've done a great job. You know that. But yeah, he just let me play football, and he handled the contract stuff, and it worked out.
So yeah, I was reading a little bit. The Lions put together, the media relations people put together these kind of packages before the season. You know, what's your favorite food? Like all these stuff that you like. And one of the things in there I was reading is the first thing that you bought when you got your NFL contract was a case of Bud Light. Like, you seem like you're a pretty even keel, pretty modest kind of guy. Does that, now that you're the highest paid, does that go to Blue Moon? Do we get something Blanche de Chamblay? Does the beer taste go up now?
Bud Light is a great taste in beer. I'm from St. Louis. I'm a Bud Light guy. My dad's a Bud Light guy. So yeah, obviously I still have the Bud Light taste, but yeah, I might buy a Bell's Two Hearted here and there now that I have a little bit more money.
I like it. So growing up, you were a quarterback, and I don't know if a lot of people know that they probably should if they ever see some of the fake punts and some of the stuff that you do. You've got a terrific arm, but just talk about you're a quarterback your whole life. How did that punter become the number one thing that kind of projected you into your college and pro career?
Yeah, so I always played quarterback, kicker, and punter. So I was always doing all three, and I was always better at kicking and punting. I was a decent quarterback. Like, when I was in high school, we had a really good defense. We had a good kicking game. I would say that's how we won most of our games.
Are you being modest?
No, I'm not.
Touchdown senior year, what was the number?
I think I threw for 18, but like, we had good players around
18?
us.
Jack, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I wasn't considered a playmaker. I would say I was more of a I don't know.
You were a pocket passer, conservative, don't make mistakes.
Yeah, I was trying not to turn the ball over. We had good field position most of the game. We had a good defense. So, yeah, I ended up being a punter because I was always way better at punter than quarterback.
And then, so you get to the league. Obviously, fake punting is just part of it. 3 for 4, 75%. So when your agent was negotiating, was any of the quarterback money involved in any of that? Was your 75% completion percentage brought up in any of the conversations with money?
You might have to ask Sean about that one, but I don't know. It's a good question.
But you've got a pretty good arm. Do you stay, like, is that something that you do, just knowing that could be called any time? Like, do you throw a certain number of balls a week, or do that, or do you try to keep up with your arm a little bit? Like, what's the process there?
Yeah, we practice it. Obviously, anything you run in a game, you want to practice in practice. So when you go out there, you only get one shot at completing it. So we do a lot of practice on the side. We obviously have a lot of time during practice to work on things of that nature. So we put a lot of time to it.
I saw, like, the first 50 punts, you're number one in the NFL all time in gross average and net. Same thing with 100 punts. I think it was 150. You got to that part too. But you entered this year, and players talk all the time about wanting to be better, wanting to improve on things. So what was the one thing that Jack Fox took into this offseason and said, hey, this is something that I want to get a lot better with, and have you seen that translate to the field this year?
Yeah, I think one thing would be like plus 50 punts. When we get around midfield and we're trying to pin them inside the 10-yard line, that's something I worked on a lot. I've had a lot of touchbacks the last couple of years. And I think we have gotten a lot better at it. This last game against the Cowboys didn't really show that. We had a 2 plus 50 punts that didn't work in our favor, which is really disappointing because I think that as a team we've gotten better at that, and I do think that's going to show as the season goes on.
You like playing under Dave Fipp?
He
seems like a guy that would be fun to be under.
Oh yeah, Coach Phipp's a great guy. I think something I really respect about him is he's not too high, he's not too low. If you do something well, he's not going to be showering you with praise. But if you do something bad, he's going to let you figure it out, and he's not going to be MFing you and really on top of you. So I respect that aspect of his coaching.
Were you always a holder too in the kicking game?
Not always. I did it a little bit in college, and then I kicked field goals for a season in college as well. So my senior season I didn't hold, and then I got here and I started holding again. So
when you go through a situation, obviously Detroit has gone through, over the last couple of years, so many different kickers, especially this year at the beginning of the season. Just how difficult is that job? Our kickers, they seem to me like a finicky group. Mm-hmm. Are they with the hold? It's got to be this way and tilted this and this. Have you had to change that up how many times this year?
So you change it a little bit. We've been really lucky because all the kickers we've brought in have been really cool, normal guys who they tell me how they want the hold, but they're not super picky about it.
Yeah.
They're football players too. And, they've all been cool. We've been really lucky with the guys we've played with.
So, honestly, what was more nerve-wracking, your first punt in the NFL or the first time you went out there to hold on a field goal? And know that that's the key part of the operation, kind of get it all going first.
Yeah, I was nervous for both of them. Like Don Muhlbach is one of the best snappers of all time, but he also throws one of the hardest snaps back there. So when you're holding for field goals and you're not real sure of yourself, it gets on you fast.
Can those guys turn it, when they snap it, can they get it to a point where they can almost control, when it gets to your hands, if the laces are in and out? I mean, has it gotten to that dynamic of a skill position with those snapping guys?
Yeah. I think the snappers expect themselves to get the laces right in a good spot. Obviously, it's not always like that, and I'm here to spin it or hold it however they snap it. But, like Scott, he prides himself on giving good laces, a good spot.
So, obviously not the start that you guys want at 1-5, but what should give fans a lot of optimism in your mind that this is headed in the right direction, that you guys can turn this thing around, and there's still a lot of season to go?
Yeah. I think we have a great coach in Coach Campbell. We always have that optimism in our locker room, and we just have a lot of talent. We've seen it throughout the season. Our offense has played really well at times. Our defense has played really well at times. I think we're going to put it together as a whole, and we're going to end up playing really good football.
Well, let's hope so. It should be fun the rest of the way. Congratulations on the new contract. Very well deserved. The best punter in the NFL is a Detroit Lion. He's Jack Fox. We'll be back on 20-Minute in the Huddle. It is time for the BetMGM key matchup segment, and for that, I have welcomed in the voice of the Detroit Lions and Fox 2 Sports Director Dan Miller. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Tim, good to be here,
I appreciate this. So every week we take a look at 5 key matchups in this game, and I thought no one better than you. You're going to be the eyes in the sky for Lions fans, so let's break some of these down. And first off, I think one of the big ones for me is going to be Jeff Okudah versus Tyreek Hill. I mean, that should be a fun one, right?
I think a number of these that we're going to talk about are fascinating. I think this one is one because of the explosiveness of Hill and what you have to do to find a way to slow him down. And we've seen Okudah play great against some really talented wide receivers so far this year. This is a different guy, though, because of the speed. And I think the thing is, in talking to some folks around here this week, you got to get up on him. You've got to slow him down right off the line, not just because you don't want him to get a full head of steam, but because so much of their passing game is the quick hit. Throw the timing off. That makes you a little exposed on the back end, but the Lions have to help him there.
Yeah, and Jeff said, too, he's kind of, gone around to a guy like Mike Hughes, who practiced with him when he was with Kansas City, and some of the guys that have played against him, because Jeff said, look, I've never played against a guy like this much speed. And not
easy
many
to get
guys
the nickname Cheetah.
773 yards for him, leads the NFL. Crazy. And he's just so dynamic. But Jeff is coming off such a terrific game. And his confidence, I can see, was building every single week. And the plateau is really that 15-tackle performance against Dallas. He hasn't allowed a touchdown all year in his coverage area. He's played physical. And I think every week that he's on the field, that he's available, you just see that building. And so that should be a fun matchup.
I think Jeff has always been a willing tackler since the moment he walked in the door, but that was another level. That was just another level, and you could see him after he made the tackles just how much he was into it, and it was great. And I think this is another step and challenge for him, and I'm really anxious to see how he does. Now, look, he needs some help, and we'll talk about some of the other things, but if you can put some pressure on the quarterback, that makes Jeff better.
It makes everything easier, doesn't it?
It does,
yeah,
man.
Jeff said he woke up a little more sore on Monday than he has before. I
15
understand
tackles
why.
against those two backs? Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's move up front, and what you alluded to is getting help from some guys up front. And let's start with Aiden Hutchinson versus Teron Armstead. You know, a talented tackle guy's been doing it for a long time, 10 years in the league, has never allowed more than 4 sacks in a single season, hasn't allowed one this year. And so, you know, they're going to move Hutch around a little bit like we saw last week, but there's going to be some instances where Hutch is on him, and that newfound 2-point stance seems to be working for Hutch a little bit.
So what we're seeing with Hutch is what we need to see, and that is him adapting to this league. And that is him realizing that, unlike in college, he's not just the best player on the team and can win just on talent. Now he needs to win doing different things. What did we see last week? We saw the spin move.
Yeah.
Spin move worked a couple times in this game. He told me he'd never spun into a sack before in his career. Well, boom,
Really?
there it is.
He never spun into a sack?
He told me he had never spun
At Michigan,
into
14
a
times.
sack
Really?
in his career.
Wow, that's amazing.
I kind of was like, whoa. But you know what? It's the evolution of his ability to rush the passer and understanding, okay, we saw the bull rush. We've seen him try speed. Now we've seen the spin. Well, guess what? Here comes a 3-time Pro Bowl tackle that has watched the tape as well.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to adapt again this week. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how he does that against a really good player, because he's going to have move, counter move, and try to make a play against a guy who has seen it all in this league. So it's a really cool matchup.
You know, and I credit Aaron Glenn, too, because we talked to him on Thursday, and he said, look, I talked to Aiden over the bye, and as a coach, you have to listen to players sometimes. And Aiden isn't going to be one to come in and be vocal. He's, look, like all rookies, you're going to put your head down, do what the coaches tell you to do. And, you know, he's playing that big end with his hand in the ground. And he says, hey, look, I think I can be maybe a little bit more effective at times standing up. I can see the field a little bit more. I've got a little bit more vision. Aaron Glenn said, well, let's do that.
Yeah.
And so he does it, and then you see the production with it. And so I give Aaron Glenn credit for kind of seeing that and allowing his players to be put in good spots as well.
Break it down to the simplest form. When you're down a 3-point stance, your first move is right into the chest of that offensive lineman, okay? As opposed to standing up, your first step is looking and kind of surveying. And I just think he sees it better. And it doesn't mean that there won't be a time where a 3-point stance won't be good for him and he'll be ready to roll. But I just think where he is right now, this is giving him a better understanding of what's in front of him. And, man, he's 6 games in. He's 6 games into his career. He's a baby, and he's learning things against and finding out that the tackles in this league are all good, and the 265-pound tight ends in this league are really good too. And you got to figure out a way to deal with him. But he's talented enough and smart enough that give him some time. I'm really interested to see where it goes, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
I think everybody is. You mentioned the Pro Bowl tackle. I think the Lions have one that's maybe trending in that direction. And Penei Sewell, second-year guy. And look, he's got a good test this week against Jalen Phillips. You know, a guy for them last year, 8.5 sacks. That was second most among all rookies. He leads them this year. It's a little bit different front than what Detroit faced last week. It was more attacking with Dallas, the 24 sacks. You see that. This is more like what Detroit was last year. Read, react, really big. They're hard to move off the ball. It's going to be a good test in the run game. That's going to be an interesting matchup as well. Is Penei trending toward being one of the best right tackles in football, in your opinion?
I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about it based on the way that we've seen him play against some of the best players that he has matched up against. He's just he's got everything that you're looking for, and his confidence has to be sky high based on the way that he played against Micah Parsons. He was terrific last week. You know, look, when Dallas got to the point where they could just pin their ears back and come, that's a different story, and it will be for anybody anywhere. But look, Penei is going to be a great player in Detroit for a long time. This is 2 2021 first-round draft picks. Don't think for a second that Penei doesn't know that. This is the kind of thing. Look, Penei is the kind of guy that will get things. My read on him he will make the matchups in his head.
Yeah.
He knew Micah Parsons was coming. You think he wasn't fired up about that?
Yeah.
Well, here's a guy that had 8.5 sacks last year. He's got 3 sacks this year. Again, both same draft class, both first-round draft
agency.
picks.
So they knew each other. I asked him on Friday before that game. He said, I know him a little bit. We have the same agency.
Exactly. And then I asked him about that, and I said, but when you get on the field, he goes, he's a Cowboy, I'm a Lion. That's it. But same thing.
Yeah,
with
and Jalen Phillips is going to be a little different matchup this week, though, right?
Yeah.
Bigger, stronger, be more physical.
That's what the tackles do. Tackles have to adapt to the different ways that
Just like we talked
people
about the
come
pass
out.
rushers, right?
I mean, and it's, look, I think the Lions feel most weeks good going in about anybody who wants to attack them off the edges with Decker and Sewell.
100%. It's a two-headed monster at the wide receiver position for them. I mean, you've got to talk, when you talk about Tyreek Hill, you've got to talk about Jalen Waddle. We'll see who's in that cornerback spot. Amani did pretty well last week in Dallas, but Jerry Jacobs is trending. We'll see if Will Harris gets back in there. I know they like him, so we'll put Amani in there maybe for right now, but we could potentially see all three of those guys, but whoever it is, they've got a challenge.
You can put whomever because
Jalen Waddle.
You know what you have to do. And I was looking at like a play chart for him the other night, and it was, Waddle, short, middle, Waddle, short, middle, Waddle, short, middle. They want to get it out fast. And they'll throw it to him all over the field, but they want to get it out fast, and they want to let him do what he does, which is run after the catch.
Or
and
two
he
speed.
Can really do that. I was talking to Coach, and we were talking about Tyreek Hill. I said, fastest player in the league? He said, probably. And then he got to Waddle, and he goes, probably just that much slower than Tyreek
Isn't that
Hill.
Amazing to have those two? And that's why you see Tyreek Hill number one in the league with the 773, but Waddle's right behind, 621 yards. And they'll move him around
18 a catch.
a little bit. Now, he plays majority of the outside, 279 snaps out wide. It does have 64 in the slot, so they'll move him around a little bit, but it's typically Hill and Waddle out wide, and they love to cross them. You got to run with them.
It gets them the ball at full speed, and then they're off and going. That's why with him, you got to disrupt it as well. Now, here's where I think the interesting thing is, Tim. I think you're probably looking at giving a lot of help to whoever's on Hill. How much help can you give on both sides? Somebody's going to have to handle probably Waddle more often than not by themselves. I mean, it's difficult to have two guys with help over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point.
Because we haven't even talked about Mostert yet either, and that's a guy that can hit you if you're spending too much time doubling guys on the outside or that focus.
Yeah.
He can gap you for 50
this
yards too.
Is dangerous. I mean,
They're very dangerous.
And Tua is really good at delivering the ball quickly.
All right, let's finish with this one. Josh Reynolds, who was back at practice on Thursday. I think that's a good sign. He waited till Friday return, so I think he's getting better from that knee against Xavier Howard. And when you look at Xavier Howard, I mean, obviously one of the things that jumps out is the 27 interceptions since 2016, most in the NFL. But he'll give up some plays too. It's a lot like Diggs in Dallas, where he gets a lot of picks, but he gives up some plays too. And when you look at Xavier Howard, 1 touchdown allowed in each of his first 5 games this year. Was good last week against Pittsburgh, didn't allow one. But to me, that's a key matchup because if you get St. Brown back, which he's trending that way, if you get DeAndre Swift back, which he's trending. Hawkinson was back at practice on Thursday. So to me, the focus with Miami is going to be that middle, those guys, those matchups. And to me, I think the opportunities to have a play are maybe going to be one-on-one out there with Josh Reynolds, with Khalif Raymond, with one of those guys against Xavier Howard. Because if I'm Miami, I'm like, I trust Xavier against that. Let's put our focus on Swift, St. Brown. But you got to go make a play when they give you that opportunity for Josh Reynolds.
The thing that I saw
guys,
that jumped out at me was the 2 touchdowns he had last year. And with the Lions this year giving up touchdowns off turnovers, I'm thinking, don't do that. But look, I think they've got to get back to the attacking style where they were getting the ball downfield.
Yeah.
And some of that has been because of injuries, and they haven't had the same guys in there. But if you've got Josh back, and you've got Amon-Ra back at full speed, and you've got guys that are ready to go, I think at that point you start to maybe see some of the explosiveness. You have to see some of the explosiveness we saw in the first 4 games. These guys haven't scored a touchdown in 8 quarters. You got to get some of that swagger back. You got to get some of that playmaking ability back. And that comes down to not backing down from a guy that, as you said, since he's coming to the league, has more interceptions than anybody else. And I think that Jared Goff is confident enough in this offense that if they can start going again and getting their playmaking back, that I think they will challenge him. So I think it's interesting and obvious also to see how he matches up with different players on the field.
Yeah.
And if that's the matchup that they go with. But whatever it is, I think the Lions this year, look, I said all along, when they're at full strength, they'll be a fantasy football team owner's nightmare because they have so many different guys that they can go to. If it's Reynolds, if it's Chark, if he's in there, when he was in there, if it's Hawk, if it's Swift, if it's Williams, if it's ASB, whoever it is, and that's what they have to get back to. I mean, I know Chark's not going to play and he's out for a while, but just get back to being able to spread the ball around the field, and then you're looking for weaknesses, and sometimes that weakness is a one-on-one coverage, even if it is a terrific player like that.
And there's been a rapport between Goff and Reynolds. You know, I think he's been probably their most consistent guy on the outside
saw
because
it from
of
moment
Chark.
one last year.
And so I think when you see that, when you're Jared and you get that one-on-one opportunity, and I know he's turned the ball over, and maybe through your head you're like, hey, I don't want to make a bad decision. But to your point, you've got to make some plays too, and you've got to score some points. And when you see that opportunity again with a guy you trust, I think you got to take that shot.
I think last year when Reynolds walked in the door is when you saw Goff start to go like this. Now, Amon-Ra started going like this at about the same time, but there's no doubt in my mind when they picked him up late last year or middle of last year, that's when Goff started to look comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's where over those last 5-6 games, he looked like the quarterback I know this team wants him to be. He looked that way for the first month. He's got to get back to that. And part of that will be, challenging a defense like this and finding a way at home, get that crowd behind you, make some plays, and just start finding a way to tilt that scoreboard in your favor.
It's a big one. They need this
win,
one.
man. You got to win. Look, whatever the record is, and you can get bogged down in that, and we know what it is. I mean, somebody told me they don't give any oxygen to the record, and that's probably the best way to be. You just need to find a way to win a game and then worry about the next one after that. But they need to, as you said, find some way to win. It is a big game.
He is Dan Miller. Those were the BetMGM matchups. Great stuff. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Tim.
Thanks, man.